Some people just can't stand being told what to do. But these Karen traffic incidents, they didn't just cause a scene, they ended in some of the worst traffic deaths ever recorded. From a woman who drove around a police roadblock to a Karen who turned a tiny fender bender into a full-blown confrontation, ending everything in the craziest way possible. It was April 18, 2020, in Monroe County, Georgia. Overnight storms had left broken trees and wet roads across the area. One large oak tree had fallen onto an electrical line, pulling it across both lanes of a county highway. Sheriff's deputies blocked the roadway with patrol cars, flashing lights, barricades, and road-closed signs while drivers were sent to a short detour that added only a few minutes to their trip. Darian Sumter, 42 years old, was a regional pharmaceutical sales representative on her way to an important presentation in Macon. People who knew her often said she argued with workers and public officials whenever she believed they were turning simple problems into bigger ones. As soon as she reached the roadblock, she rolled down her window and demanded to know why the highway had been closed. Deputy Mark Henson, 51, calmly explained that every downed electrical line had to be treated as live until utility crews confirmed it was safe. He directed her to stay inside her vehicle and follow the marked detour. Darian pointed at the silent cable and insisted there was no danger because it was not sparking or moving. She accused the deputies of creating traffic for no reason and claimed government workers always made easy jobs look difficult. She loudly told the waiting drivers that if nobody else was going to move the cable, she would do it herself before the power company even got there. I know people like this. The moment someone tells them not to do something, they feel like they have to prove everyone else wrong, and that's exactly what made this situation so dangerous. Ignoring every order to stop, Darian drove around the barricades using the grassy shoulder before parking near the fallen cable. The deputy wanted to stop her, but getting any closer risked putting both of them within the electrical hazard zone. Several waiting drivers watched from a safe distance, and a few raised their phones to record. Others simply shook their heads, expecting the deputy to talk her into turning around, but instead, they watched her continue toward the cable without slowing down. Brushing aside another warning, Darian crouched beside the heavy cable and reached down with both hands to move it, believing it was harmless because it wasn't sparking or moving. The moment her hands touched the cable, everything changed. The line was still fully energized, carrying thousands of volts. Electricity instantly surged through her body and into the rain-soaked pavement beneath her. Every muscle tightened, locking her hands around the conductor and making it impossible for her to let go. Witnesses heard sharp cracking sounds as electrical arcs flashed around her hands. She suffered severe electrical burns, and the powerful shock sent her heart into cardiac arrest within seconds. Because the damaged line remained connected to the distribution circuit, the electricity continued flowing until utility controllers remotely isolated that section of the network. Deputy Henson immediately ordered everyone to stay back, knowing anyone who touched Darian or the cable could also be electrocuted. Even though paramedics were nearby, they had to wait until utility controllers remotely shut off the damaged circuit. Once the power was confirmed off, they rushed in and began advanced life-saving efforts, but the injuries were too severe. I keep asking myself one question here. What if she had simply taken the detour like everyone else? She probably would have forgotten this roadblock by the end of the day. Utility crews replaced the damaged pole and restored power later that day. Investigators confirmed the road closure had been properly established before anyone could safely approach the hazard. Deputy Henson's body camera recorded multiple clear instructions ordering Darian to remain behind the barricades. The county coroner ruled the cause of death as accidental electrocution after contact with the energized electrical line. Many witnesses later admitted they never realized a motionless power line could still be deadly. Several even said the incident changed the way they would react around fallen electrical lines, no matter how harmless they looked. Unlike Darian, who ignored a danger she could see, our next victim drives straight toward one she couldn't. That's the part that really stayed with me. It was February 7th, 2022, on a wet morning in the outskirts of Mill Haven, Tennessee. Several days of heavy rain had left the ground soaked, and part of a busy suburban road had been reduced to a single lane while engineers checked damage beneath the pavement. Orange cones, concrete barriers, and warning signs stretched across one side of the road as traffic moved slowly. The delay frustrated drivers, but everyone stayed because the closure looked serious enough to have a reason. Melissa Carter was 45 years old and worked as a residential real estate broker. She was on her way to complete the biggest property sale of her year, and she hated running behind schedule. Negotiating was part of her job, and people who knew Melissa often said she could argue almost anyone into changing their mind. The trouble was that she sometimes treated every disagreement like another deal she needed to win. When she reached the front of the line, she asked a traffic flagger why everyone had been stopped. He explained that heavy rain had washed away the ground beneath part of the road, making it unsafe until the inspection was finished. Melissa looked down the closed lane but couldn't see anything that matched the warning. Apart from a few cracks, it looked no different from the open lane. Honestly, if I had driven up to that road without seeing the workers, I probably would have thought it looked safe too. That's what makes this case so unsettling. Instead of waiting, Melissa pulled onto the shoulder and climbed out of her SUV. She walked over to the traffic cones and began dragging them out of the closed lane. Road workers and a police officer assigned to the closure hurried over, repeatedly ordering her to stop and warning that the roadway could collapse without warning. Melissa simply removed the cones a second time and threw several into a nearby drainage ditch as dozens of waiting drivers watched. The delay had now turned into a spectacle. Drivers stepped out to watch, and several raised their phones to record. A few quietly wondered if Melissa might actually be right because the road still looked normal. Others stayed back, trusting the engineers instead. Melissa climbed back into her SUV and slowly drove into the blocked lane. Once the people waiting in traffic started pulling out their phones, I had a feeling this wasn't going to end with a simple roadside argument. I just don't think anyone expected what happened next. For the first several yards, nothing happened. The SUV rolled smoothly across the closed section, and for a brief moment, it looked as though Melissa had proved everyone wrong. As the SUV reached a section where the cracks had become wider, the front wheels rolled across the weakened pavement. The road held for one more second, and then it gave way. A loud crack echoed across the road as the asphalt suddenly folded beneath the SUV. The front of the vehicle dropped into a hidden space, while broken pavement, concrete, and wet soil crashed down around it. The rear of the SUV lifted into the air before the entire vehicle tipped almost straight down into the exposed drainage channel. More of the surface continued collapsing after the SUV disappeared. Heavy slabs of asphalt crushed the roof above the driver's seat, leaving Melissa with catastrophic injuries to her chest, abdomen, pelvis, and legs. People who had been recording dropped their phones and ran toward the barriers, but road workers stopped them because the edges of the collapse were still breaking apart. Firefighters arrived within minutes, yet they couldn't begin the rescue until engineers confirmed the remaining roadway was stable. Melissa's injuries were too severe to survive, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. As excavators cleared away the broken pavement, they uncovered a large underground cavity where floodwater had washed away the soil surrounding an aging drainage culvert. Investigators determined the surface had appeared solid, but could no longer support a vehicle after the ground beneath it had eroded. The medical examiner later ruled that Melissa died from multiple blunt force injuries sustained when the roadway collapsed onto her SUV. Road crews also recovered the traffic cones Melissa had thrown into the drainage ditch. Melissa believed the road closure was only an unnecessary delay. The next story follows another visitor who also dismissed a warning, convinced nothing bad could possibly happen to them. It was July 13th, 2018, in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the streets around the city's entertainment district were full of people finishing work and heading out for the evening. Restaurants were busy, buses moved slowly through traffic, and cars filled almost every space along the road. Just before 7 o'clock, a grease fire started inside the kitchen of a popular steakhouse. Police quickly blocked the curb lane, creating an emergency route so fire trucks and ambulances could reach the building without delay. That evening, Zandrine Crump, a 51-year-old owner of a women's clothing boutique, drove into the area to meet friends for dinner. She was known for speaking her mind and rarely backing away from an argument. A valet attendant explained that the curb had become an emergency fire lane and directed her to a public parking garage a few blocks away. The parking space she wanted was no longer meant for customers. It had become the only clear route for emergency crews racing toward an active fire. Instead of driving away, Zandrine stopped her sport utility vehicle where it partly blocked the lane and insisted she should not have to walk because of someone else's emergency. Cars quickly piled up behind her, buses could not squeeze through, delivery trucks stopped in place, and frustrated drivers filled the street with loud horns. An officer repeatedly ordered Zandrine to clear the lane before the responding fire trucks reached the scene. Rather than pulling away, she continued challenging the officer. In the distance, flashing lights and sirens grew louder as the fire engine approached. I've seen many stories like this, and they often begin with someone refusing to let a small problem go. The fire engine slowed as soon as the blocked lane came into view. Firefighters remained inside, ready to move the moment the path was clear. Officers focused on opening the route because waiting for a tow truck would have taken far longer than getting the vehicle out of the way. A second fire engine was already approaching from behind, making every lost second even more important. After several more moments, Zandrine finally stepped away from the front of her vehicle. The fire engine carefully rolled through the narrow opening, while firefighters watched both sides of the truck. As the driver's door came alongside her, she stepped back toward the cab again, still pointing at her parked vehicle and continuing the dispute. That single step placed her within inches of a moving fire truck that was already passing by. The driver's side mirror brushed against her shoulder before striking the side of her head. The impact threw her off balance, and as she stumbled alongside the curb, her foot slipped. She fell hard, the back of her head crashing against the concrete edge. Firefighters immediately stopped and rushed to help, while the second fire engine continued toward the burning restaurant. Paramedics found Zandrine unconscious with a severe head injury and rushed her to a nearby Level 1 trauma center. Hospital scans revealed multiple areas of bleeding inside her brain, along with severe swelling from the impact against the concrete curb. Doctors performed emergency surgery, but the injury continued to worsen despite treatment. After all life-saving efforts failed, the attending trauma physician officially pronounced Zandrine dead later that night from catastrophic traumatic brain injuries sustained in the fall. The second fire engine arrived at the restaurant only minutes later, allowing firefighters to stop the kitchen fire before it spread into nearby businesses. Investigators reviewed police body camera recordings, fire engine dashboard cameras, and videos captured by motorists caught in the traffic backup. The recordings showed officers repeatedly ordering Zandrine to move her vehicle before the accident. Officials also confirmed that the fire engine had been traveling at a very slow speed and that the fatal injury resulted from her head striking the concrete curb after the fall, rather than from the mirror itself. To me, this tragedy is a reminder that emergency lanes exist for one reason. They save precious time when lives are at risk, and delaying them can place everyone nearby in danger, including the person creating the delay. The incident was later included in public safety campaigns across Charlotte, reminding drivers that emergency access routes must always be cleared immediately, no matter how inconvenient they may seem. We've got 2 more outrageous traffic confrontations on the way, so hit that subscribe button if you want to see how a few moments of anger changed lives forever. It was November 3rd, 2021, in Tampa, Florida, and the evening drive home had slowed to a crawl because road crews had closed one of the traffic lanes for resurfacing work. Cars merged one by one through the narrow section, creating long lines of stop-and-go traffic. It was the kind of delay thousands of drivers faced every day, but one small scrape between 2 vehicles was about to turn into something no one expected. Eliana Rollison, a 36-year-old insurance claims adjuster, was driving home from work when another car lightly scraped the rear corner of her sport utility vehicle during the merge. The damage was minor, leaving only a few scratches on both vehicles. Ironically, her job involved helping people settle insurance claims after accidents just like this one. The other driver switched on his hazard lights and slowly headed toward a nearby petrol station with bright lighting, security cameras, and enough space to safely exchange information. Believing he was trying to leave, Eliana followed closely behind, sounding her horn, flashing her headlights, and staying only a few feet behind his car. While driving, the driver called emergency services. The dispatcher told him to pull into the petrol station, keep his doors locked, and wait for officers instead of confronting the other driver. He parked near the convenience store entrance where several security cameras overlooked the forecourt. Although the driver had already agreed to remain there until police arrived, Eliana stopped directly behind his sedan, leaving it with no room to move even if he wanted to. People filling their vehicles nearby turned to watch as she walked straight to his driver's door, demanding that he step outside. The driver stayed inside with both hands resting on the steering wheel while continuing his call with the dispatcher. The dispatcher assured him that officers were already on the way and repeatedly reminded him not to unlock the doors. Customers at nearby fuel pumps also urged Eliana to step back and let the police deal with the minor collision, but she refused to listen. I've covered enough road rage cases to know they rarely begin with serious crashes. Most start with something small that keeps getting worse because someone refuses to walk away. Eliana returned to her sport utility vehicle, opened the center console, and removed a compact handgun before walking back toward the driver's car. A simple insurance claim had now turned into an armed confrontation. Witnesses immediately moved farther away, while others shouted for her to put the firearm down. Inside his locked sedan, the driver stayed exactly where he was, following every instruction coming through the dispatcher on his phone. Eliana pounded on the driver's window with one hand, while holding the pistol in the other. As she continued waving the handgun during the confrontation, her finger remained on the trigger instead of resting safely along the side of the frame. While making another sharp gesture, she accidentally drew the pistol back toward herself, the muzzle briefly pointing beneath her chin. That one careless movement lasted less than a second. The handgun discharged. The bullet entered beneath Eliana's chin and traveled upward through her head. She collapsed immediately beside the driver's vehicle as the pistol slid across the concrete. The driver remained inside his locked car until responding officers secured the firearm and confirmed the scene was safe. Watching this unfold, I couldn't help noticing that every warning she received was ignored. From the dispatcher speaking to the driver to the people standing only a few feet away. Paramedics reached Eliana within minutes and found the wound was catastrophic and impossible to survive. They contacted the on-call medical control physician, who officially pronounced Eliana dead at the scene from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. Officers secured the petrol station while investigators collected the handgun and reviewed surveillance footage. Firearms specialists found no mechanical defects, concluding the pistol discharged when Eliana unintentionally pulled the trigger while aggressively handling it. The surveillance footage later helped investigators reconstruct every moment of the encounter, leaving behind a clear reminder that a routine traffic collision became a fatal criminal investigation because one driver refused to let the law handle a problem that would normally have ended with paperwork. I thought that confrontation couldn't get any more unnecessary. Then, I got to the next story, where someone ignores a police dispatcher and decides to take control herself. It was September 11th, 2019, on a busy afternoon in Phoenix, Arizona. Traffic was crawling near a large shopping center as people headed home from work. Cars filled every lane. Drivers were growing impatient, and sirens could be heard somewhere in the distance. Most drivers had no idea why several emergency vehicles were converging on the area. Officers had been dispatched to reports of an active shooter just a few miles away, making every second count. Shiana Thistlewick was 38 years old and owned a small fitness studio. If you asked the people who knew her best, they'd probably tell you the same thing. She hated watching someone get away with breaking the rules. Whether it was somebody cutting in line or parking where they shouldn't, she almost always felt the need to step in. That afternoon, an unmarked SUV with flashing lights came up behind the line of traffic. Nearly every driver moved over without hesitation. Shiana didn't. She believed the driver was pretending to be a police officer just to get through the traffic jam. Behind the wheel was Luis Ortega, a 44-year-old detective responding to the active shooter call. Without stopping, he briefly held his police badge up against the driver's window while continuing to edge past the traffic, signaling for Shiana to let him through. Instead, Shiana eased her crossover alongside his SUV again before using her hands-free phone system to call 911. The dispatcher listened to her report before explaining that officers would verify the vehicle. She gave Shiana one clear instruction: stay inside her vehicle, do not block the SUV, do not follow it, and let responding officers handle the situation. Shiana wasn't satisfied with that answer. She insisted the driver was fake and that she was going to stop him herself. This is the moment that sticks with me the most. She had already done the right thing by calling for help, but somehow that still wasn't enough. Detective Ortega realized every second counted. He showed his badge one last time, carefully steered around the front of Shiana's crossover, and continued toward the emergency. That should have been the end of it. Instead, the traffic light ahead turned red. Shiana shifted her crossover into park, grabbed her phone, climbed out, and started walking after the departing departing SUV. She kept recording while loudly telling nearby drivers that she was going to stop the fake officer herself. Her attention stayed locked on the detective's vehicle as it moved through the intersection. I keep asking myself why she trusted her own guess more than the dispatcher, who already knew what was happening. That's a decision you can't take back. Without looking behind her, Sienna stepped sideways into the next traffic lane. A delivery van was already traveling through the green light. The driver blasted the horn and slammed on the brakes, but there simply wasn't enough room to stop. Everything changed in a single second. The van struck Sienna from behind, throwing her several feet into the neighboring lane. An approaching SUV had almost no time to react before running over the lower part of her body. She suffered devastating head injuries, multiple broken bones, severe chest injuries, and massive internal bleeding. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators reconstructed the incident using intersection cameras, witness videos, the delivery van's dash cam, the recorded 911 call, and Sienna's own phone recording. The evidence showed Detective Ortega had properly identified himself. The dispatcher repeatedly told her not to interfere, and the fatal collision happened only after she ignored both warnings. The case became a reminder that during a real emergency, helping doesn't always mean getting involved. Sometimes the safest choice is trusting the people who are already trained to handle it.